Imagine growing up hearing that milk is essential for health, an unquestionable pillar of nutrition. Now, what if I told you that this story might be far from the truth? The idea that milk is good for you is so deeply ingrained in our culture that questioning it seems absurd. But modern science has raised some doubts that aren't widely publicized. After all, if milk were truly indispensable, why do so many people feel better when they stop consuming it? Why are there so many reports of improved digestion, skin, and even energy levels when people decide to cut out dairy? There's something that's not being told. The question remains, is milk really necessary for health? For decades, we've been led to believe that without it, our bones would weaken, our bodies would lack essential nutrients, and our health would suffer. But if that were true, how do we explain that in countries where milk consumption is extremely low, osteoporosis rates are lower? What advertisements never show is that there are many other sources of calcium that don't come with the problems associated with milk. But why isn't this widely publicized? This brings us to a delicate point: the relationship between milk consumption and inflammatory diseases. More and more research suggests that milk may be linked to chronic inflammation in the body. Many people who suffer from digestive issues, persistent acne, or autoimmune diseases find relief when they eliminate milk from their diet. And we're not talking about a small portion of the population. The cases are numerous. The issue is that casein and lactose, the main components of milk, can stimulate inflammatory processes in the body, causing symptoms ranging from digestive discomfort to constant migraines. Now, if there's so much evidence pointing to the harms of milk, why does traditional science still defend it as an essential food? Simple. Scientific studies can be influenced by economic interests. Large dairy industries fund research and sponsor health associations, shaping public perception of milk. It's happened before, with sugar, with tobacco, and now, perhaps, it's happening with milk. But how can we know what's really true when the information we receive may be filtered? This leads to an even bigger question. How does evidence-based medicine view milk consumption? After all, a single scientific study can say anything, but clinical practice often tells a different story. Science has a curious way of functioning. In theory, everything seems well-defined: research, data, statistics. But in clinical practice, where doctors deal with real people, the story can be quite different. This is where the difference between theoretical science and clinical practice comes in. On paper, milk is still recommended as an essential source of calcium and protein. But in the office, how many doctors have seen patients improve from digestive, respiratory, and even inflammatory issues after cutting out milk? If milk were so beneficial, how do we explain the growing number of people who report feeling better without it? Now, there's a problem that few talk about openly. Many scientific studies are funded by the dairy industry itself. And what happens when a powerful industry funds research on its own product? The answer isn't hard to guess. Studies showing the benefits of milk gain more visibility, while research pointing to its harms is suppressed or discredited. This has happened before. Remember the tobacco industry? For decades, cigarette companies funded research to downplay the risks of smoking. Only when societal pressure became too great did the truth come out. What if we're experiencing something similar with milk? But how do we evaluate whether something is truly good for health? The answer lies in combining scientific evidence with practical observation. You can test it on your own body. How about going 30 days without milk and observing the results? How does your skin react? Does your digestion improve? Does your energy level increase? Evidence-based medicine should take into account both studies and real-life reports from people who experience changes after eliminating milk from their diet. But does this actually happen? What no one tells you is that the idea of milk strengthening bones might be a myth. And when we look at global numbers, the story becomes even more intriguing.
Your health is in your hands, and in what you eat. Have you ever imagined relieving pain, boosting your energy, and strengthening your immunity just by choosing the right foods? This isn't magic, it's science. The link is in the pinned comment and the description. Check it out and start your transformation today.
From an early age, we're told that milk is essential for strong bones. But what if this idea were just a well-told myth? If it were true, countries that consume the most milk should have the lowest rates of osteoporosis. right? But the data shows the opposite. Regions like Asia and Africa, where milk consumption is historically low, have much lower rates of the disease compared to Western countries, where dairy intake is massive. How does this make sense if milk is sold as the best source of calcium for bones? The truth that few tell is that the calcium in milk isn't necessarily absorbed by the body the way we imagine. This is because calcium fixation in bones depends on other factors, like magnesium and vitamin D. And guess what? Milk is poor in these essential nutrients. Without them, calcium doesn't have the necessary support to be properly utilized. In other words, drinking milk thinking it's strengthening your bones might be a half-truth. And worse, there's evidence that excess animal protein, present in milk and its derivatives, can have the opposite effect, increasing calcium loss through the kidneys. In other words, instead of strengthening bones, milk may be contributing to their fragility. It's no wonder studies show a correlation between high milk consumption and a higher incidence of bone fractures. If the concern is bone health, there are much more efficient sources of calcium, such as dark leafy greens, kale, broccoli, spinach, sesame seeds, almonds, and even legumes like chickpeas. And all of this without the potential risks of milk. But if milk isn't the solution for bones, what else might it be hiding? The problem starts even before the glass of milk reaches the table. Inside it lies something few bother to investigate: the hormones present in milk and their impacts on the human body. Few people realize it, but the milk that reaches the market isn't a simple, natural, and pure food. The cow's milk sold today mostly comes from animals that undergo an intense cycle of gestation and milking, which means the milk contains high levels of hormones, especially estrogen and IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1. Now, stop and think. What happens when a human consumes a drink loaded with hormones meant for the growth of a 200 kilograms calf? Studies show a concerning link between these hormones and an increased risk of cancer, especially breast and prostate cancer. Excess estrogen in the body can stimulate the growth of cancer cells, and IGF-1 has been identified as a factor that promotes tumor proliferation. It's no coincidence that researchers have been investigating the relationship between milk consumption and the rise in cancer cases over the past few decades. And how does the industry deal with this issue? Simple. It doesn't. The focus of advertising remains the narrative that milk is an essential food for health. And concerns about hormones? They're minimized or ignored. After all, admitting that milk could have serious side effects wouldn't be in the best interest of a multi-billion-dollar industry. But hormones aren't the only problem. There's something inside milk that could be causing silent damage to the body. It's proteins. And among them, one in particular stands out when we talk about inflammation. Milk isn't just a harmless white liquid. Inside it are proteins that can trigger silent inflammatory reactions in the body, and most people don't even suspect it. Among these proteins, A1 casein and beta-lactoglobulin are the main culprits. To understand their impact, just look at how many people suffer from digestive issues, allergies, and inflammatory diseases without ever linking them to milk. A1 casein, present in traditional cow's milk, has been associated with chronic inflammation. Its consumption can stimulate the production of inflammatory substances in the body, worsening problems like arthritis, autoimmune diseases, and even neurological conditions. Additionally, it can increase intestinal permeability, a phenomenon known as leaky gut, allowing toxins and food particles to enter the bloodstream, triggering an uncontrolled immune response. The result? Allergies, chronic fatigue, skin problems, and even autoimmune disorders. And it doesn't stop there. Beta-lactoglobulin, another protein in milk, is one of the main causes of allergic and inflammatory reactions. Many people who think they have weak digestion or a sensitive gut may actually be reacting to this protein. It's common to hear reports of people who eliminated milk from their diet and noticed improvements in digestion, breathing, and even mental clarity. The most curious thing is that milk can even affect the respiratory system. Excessive mucus, chronic sinusitis, bronchitis. These problems often improve significantly when milk is removed from the diet. But there's a dairy-derived food that seems even more problematic. A food that many people can't stop consuming, even knowing it's harmful. And this isn't by chance. If you've ever tried to stop eating cheese and felt an irresistible urge to go back, know that this isn't just about taste, it's chemistry. Cheese contains a substance called casomorphin, which acts on the brain similarly to morphine, activating the same opioid receptors. In other words, eating cheese can have an addictive effect. And like any addiction, the more you consume, the harder it is to stop. But why does this happen? Casomorphin is derived from casein and was designed by nature to have a calming effect on calves, helping them bond with their mother and stimulating milk consumption. The problem is that when a human consumes dairy, especially cheese, where casein is more concentrated, the effect continues. This explains why many people can give up milk but find it extremely difficult to quit cheese. Now, think about the impact of this in daily life. Have you noticed how cheese is everywhere? Pizza, lasagna, burgers, sauces. The food industry not only knows this but exploits this dependency to increase consumption. And worse, the combination of fat and casomorphin creates a vicious cycle where the brain craves more and more. The issue here isn't just addiction. The impact of cheese on the body goes beyond momentary pleasure. It could be contributing to serious problems, including autoimmune diseases. And that's where the connection between milk and health becomes even more concerning. Few people make this connection, but milk may be directly linked to the development of autoimmune diseases. The reason? It contains proteins that can confuse the immune system, causing the body to attack its own tissues. And this can be especially dangerous when we talk about a disease that's growing at alarming rates: type 1 diabetes. Studies suggest that some milk proteins, like beta-casein A1, can trigger an autoimmune response in the pancreas, destroying the cells responsible for insulin production. In other words, the body starts attacking the pancreas as if it were an enemy. And this could be one of the reasons why populations that consume large amounts of milk have higher rates of type 1 diabetes. But milk doesn't just affect the pancreas. Other autoimmune diseases, like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and multiple sclerosis, also seem to have links to dairy consumption. The mechanism is similar. Milk proteins escape through the gut, often due to inflammation caused by casein, enter the bloodstream, and are mistaken by the immune system for invaders, triggering attacks on the body itself. Now, if milk can be a trigger for these diseases, what happens when someone decides to stop drinking milk? The answer may surprise you. Many people report significant improvements in autoimmune disease symptoms after eliminating dairy. But the big question is, if giving up milk can be so beneficial, what are the best alternatives to replace it? If milk can cause so many health problems, the next natural question is, how can we replace it without losing essential nutrients? The good news is that there are plenty of calcium-rich options without the negative effects of dairy. First, let's talk about calcium. Contrary to what the industry wants you to believe, milk isn't the only, or even the best, source of this mineral. Foods like kale, broccoli, sesame seeds, almonds, tofu, and chickpeas offer bioavailable calcium, meaning it's more easily absorbed by the body. Plus, they're free of the inflammation and hormones found in cow's milk. What about plant-based milks? Many people turn to almond milk, coconut milk, oat milk, or nut milk as substitutes. Some of these options are fortified with calcium and vitamins, making them nutritionally viable alternatives. But it's important to read labels. Some brands add sugar and unnecessary additives that can negate the benefits. Now, for those who miss the taste of milk, there are alternatives that mimic the texture and culinary uses of dairy, like nut-based cheeses, plant-based yogurts, and butters made from seeds. Today, the market offers a huge variety of options, and many of them can be made at home, without preservatives or artificial ingredients. The big question is, what happens to the body when someone decides to completely eliminate milk from their diet? The transformation stories are impressive. But you don't have to take it at face value. The best thing is to test it yourself. A simple challenge can reveal much more about the real influence of milk on health. What if you stopped drinking milk right now? For 30 days. Just 1 month. No cheese, no yogurt, no butter. What would change? The answer might be much more impactful than you imagine. In the first few days, the body starts to adapt. If you suffer from bloating, gas, or heartburn, you might notice quick improvements in digestion. For many people, the feeling of heaviness in the stomach disappears, and that constant intestinal irritation simply goes away. If you have rhinitis, sinusitis, or a perpetually stuffy nose, you might start breathing better. After all, milk is known to stimulate excessive mucus production. After 2 weeks without milk, your skin might start to change. Cases of acne, dermatitis, and skin inflammation often improve significantly because milk contains hormones that can stimulate inflammatory processes in the skin. People who suffer from dark circles and facial puffiness also tend to notice a clear difference. By the 3rd and 4th week, energy levels usually increase. Many people report feeling less fatigued throughout the day, along with greater mental clarity. This happens because milk can cause silent inflammation in the body, which even affects brain function. By the end of the challenge, you might notice that your health has completely changed. And here's the most interesting part. When some people try to reintroduce milk, they immediately notice how their body reacts poorly. Symptoms that were once normal become clearly noticeable. But why doesn't anyone talk about this? The answer might lie in the milk industry itself. After all, if people discovered the real effects of dairy, would they still keep consuming it? If there's so much evidence questioning the benefits of milk, why is it still promoted as an essential food? The answer lies in the power of the dairy industry, which has controlled the narrative about milk for decades, funding research, influencing public policies, and investing billions in advertising to ensure people keep consuming it. The strategy isn't new. The tobacco industry did the same for years, funding studies that downplayed the risks of smoking and using doctors to validate its safety. Doctors recommend this brand, the ad said in the 1950s. Today, we know how that story ended. But how many times has something similar happened before the truth came out? Studies funded by dairy companies are often designed to show only the benefits of milk, ignoring its negative effects. Research pointing to risks is discredited or given less visibility. The conflict of interest is clear. Admitting that milk could be harmful would mean massive losses for a trillion-dollar industry. Advertising also plays a key role. Emotional campaigns associate milk with childhood, family, and strength. Commercials show athletes drinking milk, suggesting it's indispensable for physical performance. But do these athletes know about the inflammatory effects of dairy? And if the true impact of milk on health were revealed, how many people would keep consuming it? In the end, the big question isn't just whether milk is harmful or not, but why this information isn't reaching people clearly. Now that you know the other side of the story, the question remains: is it worth continuing to consume milk? With so much evidence pointing to the risks of dairy, does it make sense to stick to a habit that could be sabotaging your health? If you're still unsure, here's a challenge. Try going 30 days without milk and observe the changes in your body. Does your digestion improve? Does your energy level increase? Does your skin become healthier? Only by testing it in practice will you know the answer. And more importantly, now that you have this information, what will you do with it? Will you simply ignore it and keep believing what the industry wants you to believe, or will you seek healthier alternatives for your life? If this content made sense to you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this information, leave your comment below, and tell me, have you ever tried cutting milk from your diet? What were the results? And of course, if you want to keep learning about topics that truly impact your health and well-being, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because in the coming weeks, I'll be bringing you information that no one wants you to know.